Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this roundtable edition of Where Did the Road Go? And I am here with Joshua Cutchin.
Greetings.
Adam Sayne, and I think this is the first time you've been on, Adam, right?
That is true. It's the first time I've been on.
And Aaron David from Charm the Water. I know it's the first time you've been on.
Yes, I'm very excited. I've followed you guys for a long time, and this is sort of surreal for me. So, hello.
So let's start with Adam real quick. Tell people about Conspirinormal.
Oh, well, Conspirinormal, podcast I've been doing now for about 4 years. It's like the title kind of says it, where we talk a lot about conspiracy theories, and then we'd like to also talk about paranormal stuff, UFOs, alien abduction. We'll delve into politics, all kinds of interesting, whatever subject. There's not a lot of subject that I'm not afraid to tackle on the show. So, and I've had two of the people on this line here, you, Sarai, and of course, Mr. Cutchin here. Mm-hmm. Both of you guys have been on the show as well. So,
and how did you how did you get interested in this stuff?
I'd have to say I probably have always been interested in it. I had some experiences growing up. When I was around about the age of 7, like one really weird experience. I don't know if you want to go into it, but
sure,
we can save it for some. Okay, well, when I grew up, I had, like, my parents lived in the house that my father grew up in. Okay, and my grandparents had bought this house in, I want to say, probably either the late 40s or the early 50s. And so when my mother and father got married, they needed a place to live. They didn't have a lot of money. So my grandfather rented the house to my dad. And of course, him and my grandmother had already moved out to another place. So they rented out that place to them. And I can remember certain things growing up that was kind of weird in the house. Like, there's always kind of like a feeling, like a presence in the house. I can remember being about 4 years old and there being these voices over my head. And I could kind of remember that distinctly. It wasn't anything that was like, I couldn't make out any words. It was just kind of mumbling, Mm-hmm. And when I was 7, I remember I woke up in the middle of the night, and like my room was kind of like right off the living room, and then there was the bathroom adjoining mine, and then beyond that was my parents' room, and there was another room right next door, right next to my room, and so I'm there kind of like in the middle of the house, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I kind of remember it as kind of like almost like a dream state almost, but I can remember looking over in the corner, and there was this old lady in the corner, and I think that it must have scared me because I fell asleep, and I can remember kind of like this weird dream about being with the old lady and going into the bathroom, and there being an old man in the tub, and then this other sensation of like my grandparents' house, well, my mother's parents, their house on fire. It was very strange. And, of course, being 7, you tend to kind of, I guess you kind of like go with the flow a little bit. It's like you remember it, but you don't really think about it, if anybody understands what I'm saying. And so I kind of forgot about it for a long time, until about when I was 14, and I was in Virginia Beach with my mother and my grandfather. And we went to see my aunt, my father's sister. My father wasn't with us right then, but he was still at home. he stayed and we went. But anyway, so my mother is talking to my aunt, and they start talking about that house. And by that time, we had moved out of the house. We've been out of that house for about probably 3 or 4 years at that point. And my mother is relating a story that she had something happen to her, and which I can tell you as well, which is interesting. And my aunt says, yeah, when I was growing up in that house, this is my aunt talking, she said that she was in that other bedroom that was, and then in the room that I later was in was where my uncle and my father slept. Okay, they were all kids, or maybe my uncle was a young teenager or something at the time. And she said she woke up in the middle of the night and she looked into their room, which is later my room, and saw an old lady sitting in the corner. And when she said that, I said, you know what? I saw that too. In that room. And it was kind of like this a validation that this happened to me, and then also someone else had that experience. What had happened to my mother was that she's always had some, I guess you could say, like almost kind of like psychic things that have happened to her, some strange dreams, precognitive stuff. And she said that one morning when I was very little, probably about 2 or 3 years old, she walked into the kitchen and she looks over by the stove, and there's a little boy sitting there. And she's kind of half asleep, and she's not really realizing what she's seeing, and she thinks it's me. And she says, you know, come on, Adam, what are you doing up? It's time to go, you know, let's get back in bed. And she reaches out, and the little boy disappears right in front of her eyes. And so she kind of like rushed into the room where I was asleep. And of course, you know, I'm in there asleep. That wasn't me. And she's later told me some things like that she saw the little boy and he had kind of like knickers on, like maybe it was from another time. I don't know how much of that is her remembering it correctly or, you know, or what that is. But, you know, so very, very strange experiences that have happened. And honestly, I haven't had anything since I was a child that has ever happened to me, but I've always been kind of fascinated by ghosts. Then got fascinated with UFOs. I can remember reading Communion when I was about 12, which that's a hell of a book to read when you're 12. It freaked my shit, man. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it was extremely freaky. And I remember I did have an experience, and I don't think I've ever talked about this before, but I can remember reading that book, and I've always kind of chalked this up to me working myself up. But I can remember having, around the age of about 11 or 12 years old, well, now I would say is sleep paralysis, but at the time I didn't know. And of course, I haven't really had it in my adult life. But at least at that point, I had it. And I can remember certain things happening, like, you know, waking up in the middle of the night and everything in the room being kind of like switched around, like nothing was in the right place. Like I was walking around stumbling, looking for the door. And I'm kind of look at that and kind of think, you know, I might have been disorientated. But I also remember something like when I was in the room and something fell. And I can remember like it sounded like little things were walking around the room. And it was incredibly freaky, and I couldn't move. I remember that was probably about 12, 13 years old. And then around the time that I read Communion, I can remember waking up in the middle of the night and like the door opening and like this little gray figure standing in the doorway. And then I kind of passed out.
Hell no.
I've always looked at that as being like, that was me reading Communion and psyching myself up. I looked at it that way for a long time, but since I've kind of been exposed to a lot of other ideas since then, I kind of think maybe that might have been something actually trying to communicate or saying like, hey, I'm here. you know, you asked for me. I'm here. So that possibly could have been, but I can remember kind of being like, okay, I'm gonna put this stuff up for a while. I came back to it later.
Kill it with fire. Kill it with fire.
What you said about communion maybe playing on your mind within Magick, that's sort of the key, is working yourself up psychologically to where that stuff is possible.
Right.
And so,
well, Aaron, you host the Charm the Water podcast. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how you got interested in this stuff?
Oh, Charm the Water was started just a few months ago this summer. It's a podcast about magic and the paranormal and Christianity. I've had a few Christians on. I identify as Christian.
Mm-hmm.
How I got into this was I grew up Pentecostal. So these are very mystical people. And as I grew older, I started to question all that, and then got into theology and stuff. And then my wife left, and sort of all that failed me. Like my faith failed me, and that's when I really started to seek deeper into things. I had some weird stuff happen growing up, and never did buy into the materialist worldview. Although I loved science fiction and science and stuff like that, I just always took for granted that there was a spirit world.
Okay. And what made you want to start the podcast?
You guys.
Oh, all right. Awesome.
Seriously, you guys were a huge inspiration for me. Soraya, Mike, Hanks, Joshua, you guys, gosh, I could go on and on and on. Jim Harold. Gosh, I don't know. I just listen to you guys so much, and these are the things I'm interested in. And I said, I should delve into these myself. And really, I wanted to get involved in my community here in Asheville and with the magical community at large. And it's working out great.
Now,
I wanted to make connections, and that's what's happening.
Well, everyone always says whenever you look into the paranormal starts looking back. But I found that when you look into the paranormal community and do good work, they look back too. So welcome to one of the first forays into your life getting stranger and stranger in good ways.
Now, do you find any contradiction with being Christian and being into magic?
Yes and no. Since I had my big crisis of faith, a lot of stuff fell away, and I've sort of opened up to different ways of looking at things. I think Christianity in the West is so enclosed in materialism. I mean, if you turn on TBN, what do you see but health and wealth guys? And I think we're so closed-minded. And I think the guys, if you go back to Augustine and some of the church fathers, if you go back to the grimoires, a lot of these guys, they were the priestly class, or not even the priest class. Exorcists were, you didn't have to be a priest to be an exorcist. And so these were guys who'd copy in old grimoire text and into magic. And so I think it's been an undercurrent in Christianity for a long time that's just now resurfacing with stuff like Gnosticism. And Pentecostal stuff is very close to magical thinking. So,
But Joel Osteen tells me I can live my best life now. So why would I not want to do that? As a joke.
Oh man.
Well, that's a materialistic worldview. Your best life now, as opposed to something afterwards.
Kind of cheapens it a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I think we started talking, Aaron, after we did the Exorcism show, and there was one. I know you had a couple comments you wanted to make about it, and I had one from Edward. I'm forgetting his last name, but anyway, he's a regular listener. Is it Edward? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a Levi. He's from Chile. Regardless, he knows who he is. And he said, I want to point out that the etymology of the word daemon doesn't mean knowledge, as RPGA said. He said he consulted several sources, both in Spanish and English, in order to know if he was right. And the ancient meaning of the Greek word is to distribute. The daemons were spirits who mediated between the gods and humans, and they were also in charge of taking care of the cycles of nature and natural resources.
Fascinating. I love etymology of stuff. And I know Joshua may know more about this than me. Joshua, the way I look at it is the word daemon. I mean, in the New Testament, it's largely used for evil spirit. There's only one case in the New Testament. It's in Acts, where daemon is used for pagan gods. But outside of Christian thought, in antiquity, it was used from everything from the dead to gods to demons. Do you have anything to add to that, Josh?
Yeah, I think if you really drill down, the original meaning of it tends to mean higher self, or just like a godlike version of the self. But actually, I'm going to punt it around again and punt it over to Soraya, because I know that Soraya is big into the etymology of this term as well. Is it okay, Soraya, to punt it over to you?
Well, I mean, I'm not really sure of the etymology of it, honestly. I mean, I always took it as, I always liked Jung's way of looking at it, which again was sort of a sense of the higher self. I mean, Jung used to have conversations with his daemon all the time. He'd walk through and I believe he physically saw it as well, if I'm not mistaken on that.
Right, and if you look at I mean, I do know that from my little playing around in the etymological Greek gene pool, I've talked about how theon and theol, the Greek terms that share a root for sulfur and God, likewise, are separate from the term daimon. And you think about the term demigod, it definitely implies a sort of lesser level of sovereignty over creation. It definitely implies some sort of like role that is a second tier sort of spiritual being. But like I said, that's sort of become mixed into this sort of higher self sort of meaning as well.
I think whatever we're talking about, we could maybe all agree that it's something transcendent from the material. This is something spiritual or something other than that's transcendent from the material.
Holy, yes. Not holy, but holy with WHOLLY. Entirely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and Christianity liked to take anything that was outside of itself and vilify it, especially anything pagan. So, if these are older ideas that represented, in between, nature spirits and things like that, like he writes here, a group of nymphs was in charge of the water, sea, mountains, trees, etc. So they distributed the goods of nature in some sense. And all that stuff is going to be vilified by the church as it gets going, as it starts taking control of those areas to move people away from paganism and toward it.
That's very true. I mean, you just look at Christianity today and what they vilify.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at what the Catholic Church did, a lot of what they did was like what you just described, the kind of like the gods or the minor deities of field and stream and all these pagan aspects that were around. I mean, all they really did was take the saints and just kind of, stamp them on to stuff that was already existing and was already there. And the Catholic Church appropriated a lot of that and just kind of turned it into into the saints, basically.
And not just that, but also all the holidays.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, even if you take for granted that Jesus Christ was an actual person that existed, the chances are he wasn't born in December. That was just something taken from the pagan belief systems and reused for their own.
Sure, because December 25th was the feast day of Mithras, right? I mean, and you had Saturnalia around the same time. You also had the Sol Invictus cult. So yeah, I mean they around the 4th century AD they made it match. So that makes sense.
Well, it was about like sort of avoiding. I think part of it, at least, it was a little bit about avoiding persecution too at the time. In the early era of Christianity, you wanted to celebrate openly without being called out and eventually executed. So to have them coincide with feast days makes a lot of sense. I think if you look at sort of the evidence, I believe that the evidence points to a late August birth date for Christ. But you can't look at Easter with all of its if it's fertility pageantry, eggs and rabbits and the springtime, and not say, wait a minute, this is entirely Christian imagery. It's not. It's similar.
But we can say that at least as far as the crucifixion, we do know that did take place around Passover, so it would have been generally around that time.
Right. That
year.
Closer.
That one at least is a little closer. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
closer than Christmas rather.
I don't think there would, even the most strict fundamentalist would disagree with there's been a lot of syncretism and blending within Christianity. What I'd like to swing around back to is the daemon, and is there... I guess what I'm asking, do you guys believe in an evil spirit type thing? Or are these daemons, do you just see them one way? Is it like a helper or greater self, higher self? Or are there some evil demons out there?
I think you could throw that a few ways. I think there are things that you could call a daemon that would occupy different places. There are actually different things that you could all call daemons because we don't really know what any of them are. So it's hard to make a judgment as to what they are. As far as being evil, I think that comes from perspective. I mean, I don't know that there's something as pure evil. I think you look at a snake eating a mouse. Well, the snake is certainly evil to the mouse, but the snake's not evil. It's just trying to survive the same as the mouse does when it eats something. It's just nature.
I think what you're describing is an existential evil that we can all experience in that way. I guess outside of an existential experience, I think of Michael Hughes, just what I heard on your podcast, the entity that he described I think it was a hotel room with his girlfriend.
Yes. Yep.
And his description of the feeling of that entity. I mean, again, maybe he was the mouse.
But I also look at this stuff a lot of times like it takes sometimes fear to get us anywhere. You look at shamanic journeys and the whole taking the body apart type of thing. This stuff, these awakenings are never pleasant things. I know the one I experienced that was like that was extremely unpleasant, and I thought I was dying. And
one eye?
Huh?
One eye?
What? No. The experience when I.
Oh, sorry.
It's that New York accent. Yeah, kid.
Sorry about that. So I mean, the experience that kind of woke me up to a lot of stuff, a lot of things about myself was incredibly. I felt like I was falling apart, like I was dying, and I had no idea what was happening. But the end result was obviously a very positive one. It's just sometimes. It's hard to deal with some of that stuff. There are certain beliefs, especially, that we hold on. It's like we create these belief structures, and we protect them with everything we have, and we don't even know they're there until something takes a crack at them. And then we feel like our whole world is caving in, and we're going, but wait, no, I know this is true. Stop doing this. Once it falls, you may feel horrible for a bit, but then you start putting it back together and going, well, wait, I can look at this another way, and it's not so bad.
Yes, I think our culture is, we're not thinkers. Our culture, postmodern culture, we emote. We react to everything emotionally. So, I mean, if I say pretty much anything I could say could be construed as evil in this culture. We claim tolerance, but we're actually very intolerant. the thing as a Christian, I look at evil. You hear lots of guys say, well, evil is just the absence of good. And as a Christian, I don't believe that. I don't think evil is the absence of good. It no more than light would be the absence of darkness. I think evil can be experienced and it has its own presence.
Do you think it's unto itself evil, though, or only evil how you view it? Like, how would you define evil?
Let's say there's an ultimate good for humanity.
Okay, so you're putting it in context of for humanity.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so let's say there is a transcendent goodness or something holy, whole, whatever would fight against that, against our attainment of that, I think we could classify as evil.
Because, I mean, it could be argued that mankind itself is pretty damn evil in some cases.
Yes, and from my view, that objective evil is what taints us. I think we all inherently have evil within us. Within Calvinism, that's called total depravity. It means our words, thoughts, and deeds, and even our inactions are tainted with this. The effects of this.
I like the idea of inaction being being part of the spectrum as well, which is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. A lot of times I think about, because I'm definitely in the there is an objective evil camp. But I feel like a lot of times we think about it being actions rather than apathy, and apathy can be just as insidious, or even more insidious than outright full-blown, evil.
Yes. There's a quote from a guy I can't remember the name of. You guys got into this talk on demons, and it immediately turned theological. You guys got into so much stuff. For instance, morality.
Yeah, which is why I'm glad you're here. Yeah.
Is morality? Is there an objective morality, or is this a consensus morality?
Mm-hmm. And that's a hard one. I mean, because a lot of morality is based on how you grow up, what you experience, so on. I mean, that's true of everything that we think and we feel. But morality, there are cultures that do things that we in this country would think of as horrible and immoral, but they don't see it that way. They see it as just a part of life.
That's true. You could break it down even to smaller chunks with state to state. Here in the United States, we have different laws. But I believe in an absolute morality.
In Nevada, yeah.
What's that?
Say legal prostitution in Nevada, for example. I mean,
right.
That's something that I think a lot of people aren't even aware of. But, in any city that's less than, I believe, 700,000 people, there was just an article on CNN about it, prostitution is legal in Nevada, which blows a lot of people's minds.
And that's one of those things where I feel like it shouldn't be illegal. People should have the right to do what they want with their body without the state or the government interfering.
Well, yeah, and sorry. So that me interjecting that sort of, I could see us going off on some sort of like different tangent than Aaron was thinking. So sorry about that. But yeah, sorry.
I'm definitely for anarcho-capitalism, which is an idea that's never been tried. So I'm all for it. But this is such a huge area of conversation. I'd like to swing it back if we can to get back to Soraya. You guys started off talking about exorcism. Can we swing it towards that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we already gave our thoughts on it. You and Adam haven't. So,
Adam, you're up.
My thoughts on exorcism.
Yeah.
I would have to say at this point I'm a little bit torn on what exactly it is. Because at a certain point, I used to really buy into the whole idea that you have I guess for lack of a better term, an external demon presence that is possessing someone. I just had on, thanks to you, Soraya, for introducing me to these people, Jenny Ashford and Tom Ross.
Oh.
And we were talking about the Mammoth Mountain poltergeist, and Tom brought up a point about some of we got onto the subject of possession briefly, and he talked about how some of this is something that is almost like, from what he had experienced, that he felt like this was a part of his id, something very base and primal within himself that he could not control when he was a child. And he kind of brought that into the point of possibility of that being what is going on in an exorcism. That this is a very base and primal forces coming out of the person that is claiming to be possessed. So, I don't know. I'm kind of torn between the two of which one is which. And I guess you could really kind of go both ways on it.
And I think
it's all perspective.
There may be more than one thing happening, too, depending on the case.
Right.
But, you know, when you look at poltergeist cases, the typical poltergeist case, like the Mammoth Mountain one, has a focus of somebody who's usually younger, you know, around pubescent age, mostly girls, not always. Right. And it seems to be that spontaneous PK, like they're having issues that aren't resolved, and instead they come out in the environment. And sometimes they can come across as very evil. And yet, at the same time, what it is it seems to be the deeper self releasing some of that anguish and anger. So is it actually evil, or is it just a release? Is it like getting frustrated, going to work on a punching bag? Yeah, it's violent, but it's releasing some of that stress.
Also, is the act of exorcism. If that is true, if someone is dealing with these primal forces, the id, okay, then if you have the priest come in and they're performing the exorcism, is it then a give and take between the person and the priest? Is it then this kind of cycle, like this circle of beliefs, just kind of recycling themselves, and it's just an energy that feeds off that possibly.
I think you're talking about two different things here. I from my Pentecostal background, my uncle Boyd McLaren used to travel with A.A. Allen in the great tent revivals that were happening in the 1950s, and they would have alleged demoniacs come up to be delivered, and they would do things like break out of chains or howl like animals or throw up raw meat. And I think, like within the young teenage girl thing, this is some sort of release of some pinup, something or other.
Well, definitely when you're dealing with something like, if someone is speaking Latin or ancient Sumerian, then maybe there is something more going on than just the id or the super ego or whatever. Yeah. Maybe there is an external force.
I think we have a very small vision of what exorcism is. When we think about it, we think of somebody with a demon in them that needs to be cast out. But I mean, let's go back to the Greek, which I know you guys like. The word comes from meaning to bind by oath. And this refers to the obligations of a fellowship. So in the grimoires, exercise is used interchangeably with conjure, adjure. They're all synonymous with I command. So the exorcist isn't like something out of, this priest that fights demons. The exorcist is like an adept in the binding and commanding of spirits to either summon or dispel. So it's kind of this larger thing. It's somebody who deals with spirits. We kind of.
It's probably something that's older, way older than the Catholic rite of exorcism. We're dealing with something that's probably from the primeval world, basically.
Yeah, I'd point you to Jake Stratton Kent on that. But essentially, I look at the grimoire tradition, the Key of Solomon, as being the it goes in the same manner as the Catholic exorcism. It's just somehow within culture we've come to think of it in a certain way as a person has a demon and they need it cast out is like the only way we perceive the term.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you guys this. I mean, do you think the possibility that you may be dealing with, in a possession scenario, that we may be dealing with the human spirit of the dead that are infesting someone, and not necessarily what we would consider a demon, but maybe something that is more of a human-based spirit, like confused spirits?
Yeah, that's actually there was a movie I just watched that had that idea to it. The Taking of, I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, with the old lady that has Alzheimer's.
Yeah, and they think it's Alzheimer's, but she's really possessed by this guy that she killed because he was killing kids. Yeah. It's an older movie. It's been out for a couple of years now. I'm trying to remember what the name of it is. I'm looking it up here, but I can't find it.
It's like the Taking of Dorothy something.
Yeah, something to that effect.
It was a freaky movie.
It was. And I mean, it's a found footage movie, you know.
Yeah.
But
which, by the way, Josh, I'm not much of a fan of either.
Yeah, man. Yeah, found footage has to be done really well, that's for sure. My wife can't even sit through it. She ends up, heaving into a paper bag about how
motion sickness.
Well, I guess technically that's not so much a found footage as they're using the footage of the documentary that they were filming about the woman with Alzheimer's.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that's the idea. I mean, and I think there could be different things going on with any of this stuff. I actually just had Jenny Ashford on. I talked to her earlier today with Steve Mera about the house of out in Seattle, the Demon House. Yeah, and as Steve said, it's like it looks like a poltergeist case, but it doesn't behave like a poltergeist case because there seems to be something there that's attached to the property. And he's like, I've never seen this before, where it's not a haunting, it's not a poltergeist case, it's a mix of them.
Yeah. So, can I ask you a question real quick? Not to go down too much of a tangent, but the Seattle Demon House, because I know that there's been some doubt. I know the Ghost Adventures investigated that place. And Dave Schrader, when he had that guy on the show, the guy who rents the house, basically got so fed up with him, he hung up on him live on air.
Really?
So I have some doubts about that just from things that I've heard, and like Ghost Adventures found nothing.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean much.
And for Ghost Adventures to find nothing.
Yeah, because they find something every episode, right?
So
we're gonna make some stuff up if nothing else.
By the time people hear this interview will already be up, but I recommend checking it out with Steve Mera and Jenny Ashford. The book is written really well. Steve Mera is a parapsychologist. He's not a ghost hunter. He goes in, he looks for scientific evidence, and they spent, I think he said, 2.5 weeks there. And in that time period, a lot of stuff happened. And they got recordings of it. He said they had like pretty much constant EVPs. They didn't even know. They were like filming it so they could use it as a documentary at some point. And they had things commenting over what they were doing while they were, like, say, taking equipment out. Like they would hear things going, "Ooh, that's a camera. We haven't seen that type of camera before," and things like that. And he sent it to an expert to check out. And the guy goes, "I can't make out the EVPs with the people talking over it." And he goes, "No, that's the EVPs. There was no one talking."
Which make for like the clearest EVPs known to man.
Yes.
For them to not be mistaken as just noise.
So my initial thoughts on it were, this seems like a hoax. When I saw it on Ghost Adventures, I was like, this is too good to be true. But Steve Mera has a pretty decent reputation. He presented the scientific evidence. It looks like there's something weird going on there.
Like the burnt Bibles and the Get Out scrawled on the. It just seemed like everything from every horror movie. And in that interview, I don't know how. This is probably 1.5 years ago that Schrader had him on. Schrader was on the show with them also.
Yeah.
And he interviews this guy, and he just cannot get a straight answer from him, and he just eventually gets so frustrated that he hangs up on him on live. Just says, I can't continue. So but Steve Mera, because I've read the other book that there was a Rochdale Poltergeist that she did, and I mean, he seems like he's pretty on the level, and so for him to come in and say that there's something going on makes me kind of rethink it.
Yeah, they actually sent the guy full documentation of everything they discovered, everything they proved happened. They can't say what it was. And he presented it to his landlord, who he then, apparently the landlord didn't charge him for all the damage around the apartment and stuff over the time, because this group said, no, there's something weird going on here.
Was this the case of the kid walking up the wall backwards?
No.
What? That wasn't are you talking about the house that Zach Bagans purchased?
No, I don't think so.
No. That's the one. That's the one in Indiana. The one in Gary, Indiana. Yeah, this is in Seattle, and they investigated this house, and the Ghost Adventures found like nothing. He said there was like this one incident where they were in the dark, and like the guy's wife got in Zach's face. And I don't watch Ghost Adventures very much, but I watched it because of that interview with Dave Schrader, because I wanted to see what they were talking about. So, but it was very strange.
Did you guys hear what happened with the house, the demon house that Zach was supposed to do a documentary on? He bought, and then what happened with that?
I don't know. I haven't heard anything else about it.
I want to say he had it torn down, but I'm not sure.
Why?
I don't know. Or he resold it or something. I mean,
the only reason I can think of is something really did scare him. Or otherwise, why not profit on it?
Yeah. Well, that's it. And that's definitely what he was hoping to do.
Right.
Because he bought the thing for a steal.
Yeah. House destroyed. I just looked it up here.
Really?
Kids were possessed by demons. Zach bought the house. According to a local reporter, the house was torn down. There's no word of why, but we can think of various reasons besides demons. It's not clear if this will be part of Zach's documentary.
It didn't get sucked into a ball of light like his Poltergeist did it.
I'm guessing no.
Okay.
Well, going back to what you guys mentioned a while ago about the dead. Joshua, and I think it was the last episode, I remember you saying that fairies, the fairy lore often has the dead with the fairies in these experiences.
Yeah, there's a strange blending that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's not at all uncommon to have in the literature people being taken to fairy parties or fairy gatherings and to see the dead around them. Oftentimes when people are warned of the food taboo, don't eat or drink, they're being warned by someone that they recognize as being someone who has passed away, either a loved one or a neighbor or something. This has never been really represented in popular culture, entertainment, Fae lore until the most recent series, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which actually did a pretty good job of blending that sort of dead folks, dead folks Fae thing. Did a really good job of that. But what fascinates me is, again, if you look at the associations with the dead, they don't stop with Fae lore. They continue on with, there are plenty of abduction experiences where people see people who have passed on. And,
Strieber talks about that.
Yeah. And although a bit more apocryphal, I believe, if memory serves, certain Native American Sasquatch lore invokes Sasquatch as being, part of this sort of hypnopompic role ushering people to and from the afterlife. In certain cultures. So I think that's, really, to me, with the way that my logic is tending to tending to go these days. I think it's all it starts to smell more and more of this what we would this spirit world continuum is sort of the label that we tend to slap on this. Although I do remain open to more traditional avenues of interpretation. That whole spirit world continuum seems to be more and more attractive as days go by for me.
Well, Soraya, I've always wanted to ask you. You've had so many experiences with entities and just high strangeness. Have any of your ancestors or the dead played part in your experiences? I know that's sort of a personal question.
No, not that I'm aware of.
How about you other guys?
I've also never been super close with any of my family, so I don't know if that means anything.
I mean, I would argue, Aaron, to that point, like, if you look at the lion's share, I would say if you look at, like, probably 75% plus of experiences that people have had with paranormal, they tend to be of this sort of ancestor-related variety. I mean, and honestly,
Right.
these are the stories that I hear on, like, podcasts like Anything Ghost, which is I enjoy it. I enjoy Anything Ghost, but I hear these stories about, like, my mother always said that she'd visit me as a butterfly, and the day that she died, a butterfly landed on my hand. Like, but here's the thing: it's an intensely personal experience. It's like the shamanic or the hallucinatory experience. Like, it's an intensively impersonal experience that is important to the person who's experiencing it. So I don't write that off for the person. I don't want to hear about it because it's just not that interesting to me. But for the person, I don't doubt that it's important. And I think that if you look at the majority of experiences that people have had regarding paranormal or synchronicities, they tend to be around that sort of period, just following the death of someone close to them, or in general, around that sort of ancestor, that sort of ancestor communication sort of experience.
Well, I'm dying to ask you. Soraya, probably the first time I heard of you, if I'm not mistaken, it was on Jim Harold's show, and I remember hearing you were into chaos magic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I found Where Did the Road Go? And oh man,
was it Jim Harold or Micah's show? It might have been Micah's show.
it might have been. It's been a while back. I can't remember. So I'm knowing you're into magic and stuff. I'm wondering if I'm really been itching to ask you, like, get the chance to ask you what's been your most powerful, like, experience in that vein.
That's a great question. I don't know.
If from what I know, I mean, would you think maybe Soraya it would have been the old creepy barn encounter?
Well, that was definitely the creepiest. But I mean, a lot of it's so subtle, it's hard to really say. I realized as I'm researching the stuff I'm putting in my book, there were definitely currents of things that happened, and sometimes I worked with them because I had a sense that was what was coming, and that seemed to intensify things. Yeah, the creepy barn story is definitely one that was weird and a little freaky, where I got the 3 knocks back from the barn. But I mean, I'm not entirely sure how to answer that.
I definitely buy your book.
If I ever get it done.
Man, you have so many experiences. I'm curious if Adam, are you into the magical stuff at all?
I mean, I'm interested in it. I definitely look at it maybe in a more, I think, an academic way than rather like a practitioner kind of thing. I mean, I'm definitely, well, I mean, I enjoy history, so I definitely like the kind of like the history around it. Some of the figures in it, like, Aleister Crowley or Eliphas Levi, those type of people, and how it might influence some other things that I study, like secret societies and conspiracy stuff. But as far as like practitioner, no. But I have talked to some people on the show that are practitioners, and I really do try to understand it, to not kind of just judge it or say that it's all evil or something like that. Just to try to try to understand what it's all about. Did have a chaos magician on the show named Thad McCracken. That was a few years ago now, and Thad's a very interesting guy. I had never heard of chaos magic, I think, until I'd actually read his book, and I'm not quite sure I still understand it as well as I probably should. So,
well, I'm sort of itching to tell you guys about. Soraya, I told you about, bring up my first conjuration. So
yes.
I'm sort of itching to go in that direction.
Well, go ahead. Tell us what.
Well, is this something where you want to kiss and tell, Aaron? I mean, I know that.
Yeah, Josh, you know a little bit about the details about that. I don't think I do want to go into the very personal nature of it.
Okay. All right, don't let me impede you doing it. I was just wanted to make sure that you were getting into something that you want to get into.
Right. So I follow a guy named Rufus Opus, and he came out with a book called Seven Spheres, and it's from a very Neoplatonic Christian worldview, and I decided to go ahead and do that. And so I had not finished my circle. I just had the hexagrams on it. I go ahead and do this thing, and at the same time, I see Procyon, which is a fixed star, is conjunct Venus, and I'm doing a conjuration of Venus. So I do this thing. I build up about a week, gathering all the herbs, minerals, and curios, fauna I need, and do this thing, and I go to bed. And I have the most horrific, realistic dream experience I've ever had in my life, where it was a visitation from this a woman that had something wrong with her right eye, and also a goat-headed, black goat head type thing, which at the end of the dream sequence took its face off, and there was this black void. Blah, blah, blah. It's really complicated. I woke up from that saying, oh my God, what have I done? And man, you guys know there's no getting the toothpaste back in the tube.
No.
That's a Gordon White thing. That was it for me.
Did other than the dream though, did you have anything else happen?
Yes.
Is this stuff you don't want to go into?
No, it's so sensitive for me. I'm just kind of, I've never really told this to any, so I'm a little weirded out by it. I had
also finding the way to parse out the words too can be a little difficult.
Yeah, I had poltergeist activity within the next 2 or 3 days, as well as about 30 flies came in and congregated at where this thing was in my dream.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I'm at the point where I don't know if I want to continue with this magical stuff. And I love listening to you guys. You know, you guys sort of got me into this, your 14 stuff. And you know, I've kind of, I don't know, man.
Well, let me ask you, Aaron, about, because you say you don't know if you want to continue about it. Is that because you feel like there might be something malevolent involved with this because of the imagery? Or, I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, it's interesting because this thing that appeared within Thelema, I went to my mentor first, Rufus Opus, and I said, dude, I did your book. What do you make of this? And he said, well, I hate to get Thelemic on you, but it sounds like you're experiencing chaos in Babylon. And from there, I went on to research the Celtic horned god, Bainbichet, I don't know if I'm saying that right, of Egypt. Baphomet, all these characters, traditional witchcraft, the Sabbatic goat, all these characters seem to have this horned, goatish figure in common.
Yeah.
Good old Black Phillip, right?
Yeah. And
I
I
don't-
will,
Like to live deliciously.
I will not watch that movie.
Yeah, that's not for the faint of heart. That's true.
Oh, I love that movie.
So did I.
Tomas Vincente is coming out with a book called The Faceless God. I don't think it's out yet. It may have hit. It's supposed to any day now, and I really want to get that because it looks at this figure of this goatish figure that seems to cross all these genres, even down to Wicca with the horned god and the goddess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of them are connected, really, when you look at them. But I don't know that I would take your experience of as something negative. I mean, I would, if it was me, I'd be fascinated by the reaction I got. And I don't go into details of what I've dealt with, but one of the entities I've dealt with took the form of a very powerful entity that I didn't know anything about. And I was given pieces of information, and I eventually figured out what it stood for. But I never took it to be that entity. I took it as, okay, what is the symbolism behind this entity that it wants me to understand?
Mm. I did find out that Procyon is this star in the Arabic. There's a legend about two sisters, and one of them, which we get the name Procyon, she's called the bleary-eyed, and very personal experience. But this woman came in, and she had something wrong with her right eye, and that's what freaked me out the most. That this seems to have some objective relation to star lore and the myths out there.
Mm-hmm.
And
but I wonder also if it communicates with you that way because you have some understanding of it.
That's possible. It would have to come. I don't think I had any of this knowledge before.
Okay. So like me, you had to go. Like me, you had to go out and figure it out on your own to figure out what was going on.
This thing consumes me every day. It's something I think about and have to deal with and go to bed and think about.
So has anything happened since then?
Just little puzzle pieces fall into place.
Okay.
Like that. And even this, because the whole point of my conjuration were two talismans for influence. And 1 or 2 days after that, Joshua contacts me and says, "Hey man, why don't you come out and meet Micah and Vance and me?" And it's been a roller coaster. That's when the podcast started up and everything. So
I'm a pawn. I'm a pawn. For me, I suspect, not to downplay something that even I would interpret probably as a very severe, intimidating event. But I suspect that it has much more in line to do with an eye-opening. Because you and I have talked about this before, but I suspect that this has much more to do with like an eye-opening to the way that the world works, as opposed to something malevolently targeting you. It's almost like the kid who realizes that the world isn't their house and their mother and their toys and their comfort. Mm-hmm. That would be my suspicion, but I don't want to say. I mean, I didn't have that experience, so I don't necessarily want to say that. And I don't want to downplay the fact that it could have been something horrifying. But I would suspect that like it's more of the Obi-Wan Kenobi, you've just taken your first step into a much larger world sort of moment.
Right.
I want to ask you
that.
Oh, go ahead, Darren.
I'm sorry. I probably didn't make a lot of sense with that story, but it's still very highly emotional for me, and words is hard, as Dave Schrader says.
Well, I want to ask about one aspect of that, and that's the lady taking off the mask and revealing this formless void as a face. And this is something that's come up on our show, I've noticed, because my co-host Luke was with a group. He was out in Oklahoma back when he was putting in storm shelters.
Mm-hmm.
And he's driving back with two friends of his and his coworkers, and driving back to Tennessee. And all of a sudden, he sees them start to react to something on the road, and he's engrossed in his phone, so he misses this. But the guys tell him they passed by somebody walking on the side of the road that did not have a face.
Huh.
Okay. We read a story that David Weatherly put out on the Two Crows blog about something that this people witnessed in Nashville about these characters they saw in a neighborhood here that these two beings also had no face. Mark Wyatt, his father had a story where he passes by this guy on the bicycle, this ghost with no face. And I'm just wondering, just to throw this out, what is the motif of this thing without a face? What do you think that means?
Just to clarify, the woman was a separate entity, and there was something wrong with her right eye. I feel she was very connected to the fixed star Procyon. The other entity was this goat head.
Okay.
And it pulled its face off like a mask, and there was a black void behind it, and I could not look at it.
Okay.
I looked down, and it spoke. It said, "They are all liars." And what I think of that void is, I think that was sort of a hellmouth. That was entrance to the chthonic realm, the dead, is how I look at it. Another thing this dream sequence started out with is a circle of light in the skies above a certain point. Later, after this happened, I went there and used some astronomy software to pinpoint what constellation, what stars were there at the time of my dream sequence. And it was the tail of Scorpio. And that's very, essentially death. If you've ever dated a Scorpio woman. So that's what I take from the void, the faceless thing, the darkness, death, the underworld, the chthonic realm.
So Ryan, what do you think about that the whole motif of the faceless being? Because I've seen this come up many times lately.
I don't know. There's some anonymity there, it could be anyone, or that it's stripped of its identity. That's a hard one to pick out, because is it trying to tell you something, or is it just how we're perceiving it?
Yeah. Weatherly makes the point in that article, he kind of briefly says that it's almost disturbing to us as primates because we're so used to seeing faces.
Yeah.
I think that there's, from what I understand, there were some animus-related archetypes in Jungian philosophy in regards to facelessness. But it's one of those things where there would be no shortage, I think, of psychological interpretations of this image of the faceless person, in general. I think that's a rabbit hole that would yield a lot of good results. If you just even on a cursory sort of investigation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My feeling was that this was something of its own intelligence that was visiting.
Really? Why?
I've never had a dream that real. I think it's
Adam, are you opening up the minibar?
Well, it's just I don't have anything but non-alcoholic right now, so sorry.
Nice. It just sounds like a soundboard for like a bar commercial song.
Well, that's usually how Conspirinormal sounds because there's plenty of beer. There's plenty of beer being drunk in each Conspirinormal show. So, yeah, it usually sounds that way.
Sorry, I had to call you out on that because the first time I was on Banal of America, I went to get ice and Banal just like crucified me over it. So I had to like take the opportunity to do that same thing.
I guess this little microphone I'm using is little.
It picks up well.
Than I thought.
Picks up nicely.
Also, to let people know that for once, I'm not the one getting a drink.
I would describe it as in the same way Michael Hughes described the thing in his room. But it's just something that's there.
Yeah. And anytime I have an experience, I always look back and say, okay, what was that trying to show me? What can I learn from it? Even if it's not trying to show me something, I want to know what I can learn from it. What aspect of reality, can I derive from this? What, did it mean me harm? Did it actually harm me, or was it trying to help me? And it ends up, I end up with a million questions that I simply don't know the answer to.
Well, I met a woman online. She's part of a sort of advanced astrological magic group that Austin Coppock is in. And I met her out of nowhere and just commented, I don't even know how this happened, but within 2 to 3 minutes, we'd realized we'd both had the same experience with this goat-headed figure. And the common thread was a rite that comes from the PGM, the Greek magical papyri, whatever. Rufus Opus's grimoire sticks part of the headless rite in there. Mm-hmm. And she had done the headless rite right out of the PGM and experienced this same goat-headed figure. And that freaked me out. I was like, dude.
But isn't some sort of validation what you're looking for, that you're actually dealing with something real?
I wasn't looking for a goat-headed figure. I knew the Baphomet thing was in the occult and stuff like that, but I did the Conjuration of Venus to consecrate 2 talismans. I was not looking for anything like this.
Well, I would ask you, have you ever looked into the let me get the right word right. Therianthropic entities that are associated with the goat, such as the Egyptian god Khnum, who is the god of rebirth.
No, I've heard of an Egyptian god. I think it's called Bane-Bichet or something like that.
Okay.
Ties in with the Osiris thing. Also, Set has a very goatish type face.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think there's another one that's like a god of creation and water as well.
Interesting thing, this woman that I spoke to who had the same experience said this thing was in a sort of cavern and it was standing in sort of shallow water.
Huh. Interesting. That's archetypically, consistent, I suppose.
Yeah, Scorpio, the death thing, it's a water sign. These little puzzle pieces you could go crazy with.
Yeah, and sometimes they mean something and sometimes they don't. It's a matter of weeding through it. It's like taking a dream and trying to figure out which parts are the important parts.
Mm.
Yeah, and which parts to completely discard, which are red herrings.
Yeah. Which is the junk of your brain just unloading imagery.
Yeah,
because I do think that does happen. Yeah, I think it does happen.
What's that?
That you're just processing stuff from the day.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I'll have things that I've talked about for the first time in years, and they'll pop up in my dreams. So that's evidential that it's on my mind. But I think there's some stuff that's what's the big dreams, little dreams conversation that we've had on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
And I think they can be mixed. I mean, because there are things where you look at it and you go, okay, that's dream imagery, but that seems like someone was trying to tell me something.
Right.
But we can't access it directly because it's in a state of mind that we're not normally all that fluent in.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of feeling like I opened my can of worms and wasn't really prepared to. You guys have any things that you're really struggling with that have really paranormal wise or things like that? Soraya, I know you. I don't know how you, man.
So one
keep
of
it
the first
together with all your experiences.
one of the first things that I was kind of taught by these experiences was how to disconnect myself. So, like the experience I had where I tapped 3 times on the ground and then had the barn knock back 3 times. That barn was creepy, as Joshua can attest.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
And I just went, all right, I can either walk the long way around or I can walk past it. And I said, I'm supposed to walk past it. I had no doubt about this. And I'm like, I really don't want to. So I just kind of disconnected myself and walked past it. Like the fear was still there. It just I wasn't allowing it to have a say. It's almost like, we normally have that fight or flight reflex. Mine has fight, flight, or examine. And I tried to use the examine one more. Of course, it's bad if something's flying at your face and you're going, ooh, what's that? Bang!
But I argue that you've been conditioned to because in my experience, I've had enough sleep paralysis events where I'm at the examine stage myself. Other things that happen in my life, not that I've had a lot, I'm not in that examine stage. So I think that you've sort of been conditioned because you've had odd stuff happen in your entire life. I would argue that you've been conditioned to be in that examine mindset.
Oh, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying the experiences themselves have intentionally taught me how to disconnect.
Got it. Okay, cool.
And I can do it in a real life setting. Like we had gone to an amusement park up by Buffalo, Darien Lake, and they had this skydive thing where they take you up on a 3 stories up, and you're just on a wire, and you have to pull the trigger to release yourself, and it just drops you almost to the lake, and then it just kind of curves out. And I was with my girlfriend and my brother at the time, and they're like, okay, who wants to pull the chute? And they're both like, nope. And I'm like, I'll do it. And you get up there, and you look down, and you think, that's a long drop. And your body's going, do not pull that cord. Do not pull that cord. And I just disconnected and pulled the cord. And, of course, we were fine. And I knew we were going to be fine. But it's the fact that you don't, it's like your body's going, no, danger, don't do this. And so, in a real life way, that has, that ability to disconnect and just do something has become valuable.
Right.
The ability, it's taught me not to panic is what it has done.
Now, has that ever had any sort of practical non-theme park applications in your life?
Sure. Driving down to a Nightwish show in Washington, D.C. I think I might have told this story. I actually felt something really weird happen before we got to this 8-lane highway or whatever ridiculous thing it was, middle of the day in D.C., tons of traffic. And I had this, I don't know even how to describe what happened before. It was like my brain was playing different things through it that were going too fast for me to process, and I just felt really weird. And then we hit the highway, and in front of us, just the car right in front of us suddenly just spins out and slams into the car next to us and starts spinning in circles. And we're doing 80 miles an hour.
Oh, gosh.
At no point do I panic. I just very casually drove around it and kept going. Never panicked. Wow. Like that disconnect just kicked in, and I knew exactly what to do. Never touched the car. And I don't even know what happened because we were still doing 80 miles an hour. So by the time I slowed down and pulled over, it was farther back than you could see. And, my friend whose car it was going, I'm really glad you were driving because we would be dead right now.
Yeah, it's not to be pedantic about, it's all about the experience and teaching people things. Not to be too pedantic about that sort of thing, but, maybe it is. Maybe it's that ability because, even if there was just that one event that could have been life-changing in terms of, being a horrific accident, even if there was just that one event, it still seems worthwhile for an entire lifetime of weirdness,
But I like the weirdness, so I'm okay with it.
Right.
The part you mentioned about too many thoughts coming in to process,
Mm-hmm.
I've had that happen on LSD. And everybody comes away with a hallucinogenic experience thinking they've like come away with some great it's like such a intense thing. You come away with it having feel like you have some insight because you're bombarded with so much thought that you can't process it.
Yeah.
And so it's how Lon Milo Duquette describes the Western esoteric system. Like you taking all this Kabbalah and all this information and make all these connections until there's a sudden point where you reach this Zen state, whereas the Eastern guys, they just try to blot out their mind and think of nothing. The Western system tries to put so much in, we reach that same state. And I think that's what you're describing and what I've experienced too.
That's an interesting outlook. You cram so much in that you sort of have to have like an Etch-a-Sketch solution and just shake everything free again. Yeah.
So what exactly disturbs you about it, Aaron? Like, what is it that, is it because it felt malevolent or just because it's an imagery that you normally would associate with evil?
It had a lot to do with my mother, who has dementia and who lives with me. And she was very central to it. And there were several precognitive parts of the dream that came true as quick as I woke up and as true in the next 2 or 3 days and even in the next month. So I feel this was something I contacted that put me through a very intense emotional ringer and said, hey, I know what's up. Here it is. And sure enough, as I even woke up, those things began to play out to show me that this wasn't just some dream. This was something that was visited me and said, hey, this is what up.
But wouldn't that be valuable? I mean, isn't that...
It is extremely valuable, but at the same time, it's to face the reality of that.
I would also caution about taking anything such experiences have at face, like, as we've seen over and over in these experiences, you get told, people get told things, and they all pan out, and then suddenly they pull the rug out from underneath you. They have that trickster element to them.
Because it has to put you in a place of vulnerability, right?
Right.
I mean, I was just listening to the latest Skeptico with was it Skeptico? I guess it was Skeptico. With Greg Carlwood talking about how he had been given he wanted to try LSD on his own terms, and he was in this car with this like really super laid back family, and it was a really positive setting. He's like, sure, I'll try a tab. And nothing happened. He's like, well, okay. Well, they're like, okay, we'll try some more. He tried 2, and then he gets like 4 tabs in the system. They're like, well, I guess it just isn't going to affect you. And then he's let out of the car at his destination, and then it kicks in. So it's almost like because his whole thing was, I'm going to try a little bit. I'm going to try it under my own terms. It's almost like, some sort of intelligence directed him to take more than he should have on his first dose, and like all the scenarios had aligned to shove him out of the bird nest, right? As opposed to gently letting him try to make his way to the ground. So I think that like a lot of what these things have to do with is putting us in a place of vulnerability to allow us to grow.
Absolutely, I would agree with that completely.
We started this off with people stuck in their paradigms.
Yeah,
that'll do it.
But Sarai, you mentioned about the trickster element, and that's the one I think that I have. Well, it's particularly interesting to me, but also, how do we trust these experiences when you do have that element.
Well, that is a very good question, and I don't know. I mean, because I've never had the experience where any of this stuff has lied to me, and maybe because I don't fully believe it, I always take it with a grain of salt. I kind of like, it's like I take it under advisement.
Right.
It's like, okay, and then I just see what happens. I don't dive head first and go, this is what's going to happen because they told me so. It's like, okay, we'll see, and maybe that's why it's never bottomed out on me.
That's very interesting. You guys, I think Joshua and you both, Soraya, take an agnostic type of view you have an agnostic worldview.
Yes.
And, well, I don't want to speak for you guys. Joshua, anyway, me, I come from this Christian worldview, which is top down from, this one being above. And there's really no sense of dualism. Everything is in his control, or in its control, or whatever you want to call it. And so all these experiences I experience are essentially what I'm supposed to go through. And so that's what comforts me through this stuff.
Oh, I would agree with that. Even being agnostic about this stuff, I feel like the stuff you experience is the stuff you're supposed to experience. I wouldn't say it necessarily comes from God, because I think God is hard to define. But I would say that, perhaps before we're in this life, we plan out certain experiences that we want to experience, something we need to grow. And then we sit back and we have those experiences. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I've always felt there are like key things in your life that are going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I maintain a healthy degree of agnosticism about a lot of these subjects. I myself am a Christian, but I'm definitely a Christian with a lot of wiggle room for what that means. One who is quick to syncretize. I'm thinking more and more about adopting the standpoint of a Christian animist, whatever that might entail. Which is some people might see as like sort of an oxymoron or a contradiction, but I find it hard to believe that we're asked to accept this really broad Christian mythology, and I mean that in the best sense of the term, Christian mythology, and yet make it still this like dichotomy of good versus evil. That there's no room for completely indifferent spirits or spirits that can sort of choose their alliances. In terms of like Forteana, my agnosticism completely stops at psi phenomena, and I will argue people down, and I will dismiss people who dismiss the existence of psi phenomena, because there is so much good scientific evidence in favor of the fact that this is a real thing. On some level, there is something to a lot of psi phenomena, and to ignore that, I think, is highly irresponsible. And sort of that's in saying that, that's sort of my gateway to kick like everything else in, because if that's a possibility, then everything that we know is off the table. But in terms of like me being dogmatic about something, there is a very strong and larger than we suspect kernel of truth to the reality of psi phenomena.
Well, and I would agree.
I want to say this to further Josh's point. I consider myself a Christian as well, and
there are two of us. I say.
But
I'm
pretty sure I'm the odd man out on this one.
Yeah, I think you are.
Well, Soraya, I don't know.
I used to really believe in the whole fact that very much in the vein of, you guys are familiar with Joe Jordan. Are you familiar with his work? You guys have talked about this stuff before, about the alien abductions being stopped by the name of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I to a certain extent I still believe that is true and that does work. But I used to believe that all this stuff was demonic. And now I'm not so sure. It's probably from the influence of a certain show called Where Did the Road Go? Set me kind of on the path, because I really started to think about, is it, or is it just perspective? or is it more something that is something that we're supposed to go through in our lives, so we have to face these entities? I'm still leery of the phenomenon. I still don't trust it, but I have more reasons to trust it than just from a religious point of view. You know, you guys talk about Jacques Vallée, his stuff a lot in the Passport and Magonia. It has a very trickster element to it outside of Christianity. So although I'm not as dogmatic as I used to be, so I totally understand where you're coming from on it, Josh.
The nuance is to accept the fact that this might be demonic in the sense that most of the Western world understands demonicism,
right?
But not be demonic in the Christian sense.
Right.
It's really opening yourself up to like the nuances of what that might entail.
There's a Christian author named Chris Putnam. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him.
No.
He's actually from North Carolina, Aaron. But he's someone that I've followed for a long time, and he wrote a book, and I would advise all you guys to read it. It's called The Supernatural Worldview. And he comes from a very, I would say, like a Reformed Calvinist tradition.
Uh-oh.
But he doesn't come from the point of view that all ghosts are he's primarily talking about ghosts in this. Psychic phenomena, like you described, Josh. And, he talks about, but he doesn't talk about it. I've seen some guys that will just say it's all the devil. Bigfoot's the devil. Grandma comes and tells you where the treasure is buried. The key to the safe deposit box, that's the devil. But Putnam takes a much more nuanced view of it, and he actually goes into a little bit about the root of the word demon and what that can mean. That's why I brought up the whole thing about human souls, possibly. But there are Christians out there that I think do think a little bit outside that paradigm. Yet Putnam still thinks about it within a biblical worldview. It's just that a lot of people's ideas of what they think they know about the Bible is really based on tradition and not what's actually in it.
Right. How many people with strong biblical beliefs have actually read the Bible?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And that is a thing too with just following the herd. When I was growing up, we were Christian, but I never learned anything Christian from my parents. We never went to church, but we were Christian because that's what we were supposed to be.
Well, I would argue that I would argue that that's an expression of ancestor worship. My daddy was a Christian. My daddy's daddy was a Christian, and my daddy's daddy was a Christian, so I'm going to be a Christian. That sort of thing.
But I think it was also a matter of fitting in. You didn't want to stand out, because the majority of people are Christians, so that's what you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So that's what you do.
America had this Christian worldview. America had a Christian morality, whether people were actually Christians, claimed to be Christians or not. There was a Christian morality. Years ago, when you'd go for a job interview, they'd ask what church you went to.
Yeah.
And the Billy Graham era of that is like over. We're no longer a nation of Christian morals. Before, like everybody, no matter where you came from, sort of had that way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I sort of appreciate that question. I have plenty of friends who are atheists and who I'm very close to, and I think that they're great people. But I sort of appreciate that question in the continuum of responsibility and community in a lot of ways. So I don't think that question is necessarily out of place. Obviously, you couldn't ask that nowadays, but I think that what that question got to in earlier years is not entirely sacred based.
So what would you think it is?
What would I think? What is?
If it's not a sacred base, you think it's just more of a social thing?
No, I'm just saying. I think that there's some natural outgrowths of. So the question was, what church do you attend? I think that the question speaks a lot more to do you have a community of people who a support community? Do you I mean, a lot of what it means to me, and I know this isn't necessarily a prerequisite for people who go to church. People who go to church don't necessarily do this, and people who don't go to church don't necessarily not do this. But it does imply that you're thinking about things that are not entirely material to some degree.
Okay.
That'd be my loosely formed off-the-cuff argument.
Well, I'm just impressed that Adam knows the terms Calvinistic and Reformed.
Why don't you tell us a little about that? Either one of you.
A
You
little
go
bit
first.
about
The
what?
Calvinistic type of stuff. 'Cause I don't know anything about it.
Well, primarily, of course, based off the work of John Calvin. You had the whole idea of predestination, and I think Aaron mentioned something about it earlier. It's, let's say, a good percentage of, like, the Presbyterians are based in Calvinism. But of course, Presbyterianism is more of kind of a loose knit group. You got more liberal and more conservative.
Which the liberals would be PCUSA.
Yeah, I would. Right. I would probably disagree with a lot of Calvin's theology, just really from the point of view of like predestination, the whole idea that you're pre-selected to be saved. That doesn't fly well with me. And also, the lack of the emphasis of free will, because if you have predestination, you don't necessarily have the free will.
Right.
There's a few other, I think, political things involved with Calvinism that I won't go into that here.
Well, I would just say I love philosophical naturalism because they so embrace predeterminism. They embrace determinism for different reasons. But if you were to ask a Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins or whatever, they are determinist.
Yeah.
Calvinists also are determinist. And I love Calvinism because it's so logical. And if you're not Calvinist, it goes back before Calvin to Augustinianism, St. Augustine's theology, and he was within the Catholic Church. But man, when I wanted to make sense of the Christian beliefs, that's what I went to, and it laid it out in a systematic theology that made a lot of sense to me and was not emotive, was not based on experience or mysticism or blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus of good feelings.
Yeah, it has a very practical. Yeah, it has a very practical approach to it. You're right.
And
you're definitely right.
Would you agree with me that if you're not coming from that point of view, would you understand what I meant with Arminianism?
Yeah, somewhat. I know that was kind of a reaction against Calvinism, or really a reaction against Puritanism.
So Armenians are big on free will, on man's free will.
Right.
So what do you guys think? Do we have free will, or is it all determined and we're just kind of like acting out the parts?
It's funny, Sarai, that you mentioned this because we talked about this a few times on the show. I was talking about Ryan Buell and what's going on with him. Are you familiar with all that?
I am.
I'm not.
Well, like he, the paranormal state guy. I think Josh.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he apparently had, coming up with this story that he had pancreatic cancer and that he had, and then he was accused. He's been accused of stealing $80,000 from people.
Yeah, he's in jail right now.
Yeah. He's actually. I think he's out now. I think he got out finally, but I think they've managed to get him out. But I was talking about whether or not the possibility of the things that he did with the paranormal research, whether there could have been any kind of demonic influence on him, as he always claimed, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, some of that could have been narrative for the show as well. That's another aspect to it. but I kind of got into a little bit of discussion about free will. Like, we have the free. That's just another way of saying that, hey, the devil made me do it. In this case, it's just a demon, and talking about, well, we do have the free will to not listen, I guess is what I would say. So it's interesting that you bring up that concept.
All right. What about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I would say we definitely have free will.
Yeah.
I like this metaphor. The goldfish in the goldfish bowl has the free will to circle around in as many ways as he wants, but there's a greater reality, and that sees that he can only make so many moves in that goldfish bowl. So from a larger perspective, I believe in determinism, but I have to live my life out from a perspective of free will.
That's very well put. I like that.
Interesting. Are you with us, Josh?
Yes, I thought that was a really well put point on Aaron's behalf. I would like to be careful to suggest that I don't even really know how much to expand upon this other than offering like a fortune cookie saying, but like I would be careful to suggest that people should not fall for this sort of false dichotomy that there isn't free will. It's either free will or determinism. I think that perhaps there is a middle ground, or perhaps they might be one and the same. And I don't really, speaking again off the cuff, I don't really know how to expound upon that. But I think that the idea that free will and fate are at odds speaks more to the way that we interpret our reality as human beings than it does to what might actually be an objective existence.
Okay.
I think a good story that illustrates for me personally about the existence of free will and the whole concept of determinism, or whether in this case blaming something else for your problems. I can remember being at a college here that I was taking some classes at. It was a Christian school, and I actually sat down to check my email. Well, somebody else's email was pulled up, and of course was incredibly nosy, so I'm reading through this email, and this girl is talking about how she just can't do it. She just can't do college. Satan is really working on her, and she just can't seem to get anything done. And I talked to a guy that was in the same program that I was in, and he's actually had a degree in theology. And I asked him about that, and he said, I see where she's coming from, but at the same time, she's kind of made the choice to not go to class and to not succeed. And that really started thinking in the veins of, yeah, I mean, we do make choices, and then we do try to blame it on, be it demons, Satan, whatever it is, Mr. Rogers, I don't know. But it's just when you have that, I think some people get in that mindset that there's always something external working on them, and they find something to blame.
Well, one of my favorite books that I've mentioned on the podcast before is written by Craig Ferguson, who was a late-night TV show host and comedian. And it's called Between the Bridge and the River, and it's like one of the most... It's the second most important / second most quotable book in my life after T.H. White's The Once and Future King. So it occupies a pretty big space in my life. But there's a great quote in there about how most evil begins with the victim excuse, and I think that there's a profundity in that. That in all our lives that we can it's very easy to say, well, it all comes back around to justification of your actions, and lack of self-responsibility.
Yes.
Right.
I would like to point out that in the grimoires, there's such a focus on prayer and fasting, and I think prayer is the one place that you can go to get rid of that. You got to be honest. If you're going to pray, you have to be honest with yourself and come to an honest place and talk real talk. All the ego stuff, all the victim stuff falls away. And it's like this little space of honesty.
Yeah, and I that's one of the reasons that so I've been one of those people who have had problems with praying for a lot of my life, just in terms of focus, just in terms of being able to not let my mind wander. I'm trying to start a meditation regime, as it were, but we'll see how that turns out. But that's one of the reasons that I find certain aspects of magical practice attractive, is because it allows me a chance to, or it allows people who practice it a chance to focus on something outside the self, something physical, and allows them to actually sort of focus their intent and to remain in the moment, which is something that I have a very hard time doing.
Presence of mind, whether you call it meditation or prayer, whatever. We're talking about the same thing.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
Slightly different techniques, but it's basically achieving the same goal.
Well, it's many hands on the elephant, right?
Exactly. Did we finish talking about exorcism, or did we get completely sideswiped?
Did we start talking about exorcism?
We did.
Where did the road go?
I started watching the Exorcist TV show, and it's actually pretty well done.
Uh-huh.
I'm not quite sure where they're going with it yet, but I'm enjoying it.
I have not seen it yet.
I haven't either.
I did.
Now, let me ask you though: is it supposed to be based on the book? Is it kind of like a retelling of the book or the movie, or how is it?
I've never read the book, but it's nothing like the movie.
Okay.
It's very different. It's and it like I said, it's very well done. Even if it turns out to be stupid story wise, at least like the structure of it, the acting and stuff is all very good.
Yeah.
Well written.
I've heard good things, and that I hear that it goes some places that you don't think it will. So I'm eager to check it out.
And it brings in the whole idea of like the girl is possessed, and they're trying to get help for her from doctors and so on and so forth. And it has that sort of dichotomy going where, the family thinks she's possessed and the doctors are like, she's not possessed. What's wrong with you? This is, a medical thing and she just needs help. And so it represents both sides there.
Let me ask you the actual case behind the exorcism of Emily Rose. I cannot remember the name of the actual girl, but have any of you guys ever looked into that? And what do you guys think of that?
I saw the film, but I have not looked into the actual case.
Yeah, same here.
Because that's one that seems that's one that I'm kind of on the fence about. Whether just the psychological thing that I was talking about before, whether that girl actually had some real mental issues and then it just became this vicious cycle with the priests. I know that the actual in the film, the priest is taken to court, and that actually is what happened in Germany. Well, Anneliese Michel, that was her name. But
I feel like that's sort of one of those. I feel like I'm doing this a lot on this particular show, so forgive me for this, guys. But I feel like that's one of those like sort of wrong questions to ask sort of territory. I mean, so I feel like the idea of like clinical materialist insanity and supernatural exorcism, or rather possession, bleed over into one another a lot more than we'd like to admit.
That could be.
And so I wonder if, like, I think there's some cases that are clear cut, but I'm not sure that even when it seems clear cut, if we're not mistaking on some level one for another, in some sense. And this is just me being devil's advocate, Josh.
Yeah.
Shtick.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah.
My feelings about that case is that she was, she had this worldview, and
Hmm.
she played on it. And I honestly don't think she was demon possessed. I think it was a sickness within her that the people around her fed.
Yeah.
I don't even remember the movie that clearly, but I find that any movie that starts with based on a true story probably is nothing like the true story.
Yeah, there certainly were elements that were, very Hollywood, but I think in some of the basic story, it was pretty close from what I understand.
You're talking about Annalise.
Yeah, Annalise Michelle. Yep.
It's so strange because my girlfriend knew that I was coming on tonight talking about exorcism, and she sent me a link to that and had her picture. That horrible picture of her.
Yeah. And if you listen to that audio, I mean, it's extremely unsettling. But what are we actually hearing? That's the thing.
Well, here's the other thing.
I should dig into this then.
The other thing, when we were talking earlier, and you were saying, well, sometimes they pick up languages they don't know, and so on and so forth. What is there out there that we don't normally have access to, that we may have access to in other states of mind, that don't necessarily require another being to be there to, present it through? So if the priest knows Latin and someone is having this experience that may not be a demon possession but may look like a demon possession, but is actually giving them access to stuff they normally wouldn't be able to, that their subconscious mind is picking up, and they can pick up those Latin phrases and things about the priest because the information is there.
Right.
In the reality is made out of information, basically. And so I think when people have psychic premonitions and stuff, it's you picking up pieces of that information before your normal senses do.
Well, I was thinking about what you had wrote when you had Rogan on, and that story that he had talked about, that his parents believed that he was possessed.
Yeah.
And he had a good explanation as to why he was speaking French.
Right. Whether or not that's the case or not, but yeah. I mean, there could be all kinds. It's like when you hypnotize someone and take them to a past life, and they're not someone famous, and they give you all these little details and stuff. It could be that they came across that information somewhere. It's stored in the back of their mind. It's not conscious. They don't know anything about it. But when they're hypnotized, their brain's going, oh, wait, there's this, and throws it out there.
Yes.
Yeah, I think of the people with head trauma who wake up speaking in some other language.
Yeah.
I think of Jung's the unconscious and the ability to tap into all this knowledge, this universal knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
What is the unconscious? Is it, it's a term we use, but it's a small mouth noise. Unconscious. What does that mean?
I think it means things that are a part of us that we don't have direct access to.
Or control over.
Yeah. And I think we can gain it. Like dreams are essentially a function of the unconscious, but you can teach yourself to lucid dream.
But but I see sort of what Aaron's getting to as well. I mean, it's like it's sort of getting into angels on the head of a pin territory in terms of like how that applies to everyday life and what that really means in terms of the way that it interacts with other people and interacts with reality, right?
And how it functions with symbolism as well.
Right. Right.
Something
go on.
Something I was just thinking about, Soraya, was you mentioned we talk about movie and TV shows, Exorcism of Emily Rose, The Exorcism. And we got to really factor this in about how much Hollywood and how much these movies may have an influence now on what people are experiencing. Are they just picking stuff up now from these movies because it's so broad in popular culture?
Absolutely.
Another question is, what is influencing the culture? What is influencing these movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, which way does it go?
Circle. Yeah. we've
And it
talked
is
a
hard.
lot. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, we've talked a lot about, like, I've made the point about the black-eyed kids, that remember in the 90s and the X-Files, whenever the alien virus would infect somebody, their eyes went completely black. You had the show Supernatural, that has the demons with the black eyes. When somebody's possessed by a demon, they have a black eye. So this became a common motif starting in the 90s. And then all of a sudden people start seeing the black-eyed kids with the solid black eyes.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's like popular culture influences what people are seeing. Like Slender Man is another one. We know Slender Man's not real. We know it was made up, but people are seeing Slender Man. In fact, little girls are killing each other for Slender Man.
Yeah.
We exist in a subconscious ecosphere chamber, really, is what I think it comes down to.
Yeah.
I've heard you guys talk about valet so much and how UFOs and this high strangeness is connected so intimately with our consciousness. And that's how I would describe my conjuration. That whatever showed up was so intimately connected with my consciousness. That's what was disturbing about it.
It knows you better than you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's digging the stuff up for you to deal with.
Yeah.
It's making you question yourself.
Which was a late red pill junkie edit to my book, which is the idea of the smell of sulfur sort of representing the shadow self in terms of the Jungian idea of the fact that we have this self that is under the surface, subterranean, and that we don't really acknowledge, but is wholly a part of ourselves.
Interesting. Just the whole thing with smells is interesting, Joshua.
As I said, I'm like, this sounds like a shameless plug for the book, and I did not mean for that to happen. I'm being a jerk.
But now I find myself, whenever I read an account to something, it's like, do they mention smells?
It happens a lot more than you think it does. That's for sure.
But it is
And it always falls into certain categories too. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Also, your book is on. I've not read your second book yet. Give us the name.
Oh God, guys, come on! Really?
It's hard to remember.
It's the Brimstone Deceit. It's not hard to remember because it sounds like a Joel Osteen book, right? It sounds like.
That's the second time he's been mentioned tonight.
Yeah, right. But it sounds like that. The Brimstone Deceit, the supernatural sense, otherworldly odors, and monstrous miasmas.
No, I think L.A. Marzulli wants his title back there, Josh.
Love it. No, honestly, guys, I seriously didn't intend for this to derail. I'm sorry.
It has to have rails in the first place to derail.
But that reminds me, Sarai, have you seen this film called I would ask you if you'd seen it, if I could remember the name of it. It's called, it's a film on Redbox. It's like Borderlands or Shadowlands.
It's got that one guy that was in that one thing.
It has nobody in it. It's this crappy. I stopped watching halfway through, but right before I stopped watching was this one. It's an anthology, horror anthology, and they actually end up driving outside of town, and the road stops, and they freak out. And I wanted to do like a screen grab and do where did the road go, but I'm sorry, I'm completely off the rails now. Sorry about that. So yeah, the subconscious. Let's circle back around here.
All right, subconscious. Let me throw something in. This goat thing that showed up in my conjuration the night of was so strong and so forceful, and about a week or two later, I had a dream of a goat in a cave with peacock wings. And
Ooh.
The goat was receding into the cave very shyly. And I was following it in with a camera and taking pictures of it.
That's kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Satan is shy of his peacock wings.
Well, in the first dream, I mean, this second dream was nowhere near as intense. It felt like a dream. The first experience did not feel like a dream. But all these Jungian things come in with the second dream, with the cave and the darkness and receding into the darkness and the peacock wings.
The peacock wing is an interesting motif because of the eye symbolism, right? I mean, that's what even biologists will tell you, that the peacock wing exists to produce this image of, like, 20 eyes looking at a predator or looking at a mate, right? I mean, that's my understanding.
I didn't think of that. I've been dying to ask you guys since I started listening to you. I'm a Capricorn. I've been dying to ask you guys, what are your guys' sun signs?
Now, sun sign is the same as a birth sign?
Right, yeah. Like,
So I actually use 2.
really?
Because
You're on the cusp?
No. Because my actual birth sign is Virgo, but when I was given the name Soraya, which I take kind of as a rebirth, was Taurus. And the Taurus symbol was actually presented to me just before that happened.
No one pay attention to me while I Google what's my sunsign.com.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I'll jump in. I'm a Leo.
And incidentally, I do fit both the characteristics of Virgo and Taurus, but I fit Taurus slightly better.
Yeah, I do, Soraya, see you as a Taurus in your endeavors. I mean, you got these podcasts going, and you're all over everywhere. That does fit. And the Virgo fits with you being a people person. I don't know your personal life, but that would suggest that you're a sort of nursing type, caring type person in your personal relationships.
And at the same time, I'm an introvert, so I like contradiction.
Yeah, it looks like I'm a Taurus. I'm a Taurus.
Really?
Taurus. So I'm a Taurus. My sun sign is Taurus, but I was also born in April, so I'm a Taurus anyway.
That sort of makes too. I mean, that makes sense too, Joshua, with your headstrongness into your research, and just
in other aspects of my life as well. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off your conversation with Soraya. I was sorry. That was rude.
I think we were done.
And Adam, you said you were a Leo?
Oh,
Leo. Yeah.
okay. Well, good.
Well, my first wife was a Leo, so you're sort of a center type of attention person in your, I would guess, like
sometimes, I suppose.
do you have to be right all the time?
No. I think I'm very much opposite of that, actually. I don't feel like I think I feel like I'm a pretty good listener, and also, yeah, I the way that I kind of structure my show is that I let people talk. I'm not a big challenger, because I want the information to be gotten out there, basically.
Right, and that's how I do things as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I will occasionally try to get someone to be a little more definitive about things.
Sure.
Like Lloyd Pye, for instance, the late Lloyd Pye, when he was on, and he's claiming the Star Child skull, which I think is a genuine anomaly, was a gray alien. And I kept saying, but you can't say that unless you have a gray alien skull to compare it to. How could you make that claim? And he, his response was, well, I have a gray alien skull. And I said, we do? And he's like, yeah, the Star Child skull. And I'm like, no. and I dropped it, because I wasn't trying to get into an argument with him over it. I just kind of wanted to it's like, here he is doing all this DNA research and doing stuff the right way, but then he throws that out there, and it's like, this is not based on anything but belief.
Well, at least you haven't had anybody deny the Holocaust on your show, so
That's true. That's true.
I've had that.
to me, the proper podcasting approach is give people enough rope to hang themselves, and then go in after the fact and address it.
Right. Exactly. Here's how they're wrong.
and not in the sense that you're not allowing people to like, because I think that you should allow people to defend themselves. But I mean, for example, like one of my favorite conversations ever, Soraya, was our anti-extraterrestrial hypothesis episode that we did here, which was a direct outgrowth of an interview that you had that was talking all about hybrids and all sorts of other stuff.
And it wasn't meant to be disrespectful to them. I believe they believe what they were saying. I just think that it's part of a bigger picture.
Yeah. But I think that like the conversations that you can have taking apart and examining certain claims are more productive than the conversations you can have in media res, as it were, in the moment with certain people. Yeah.
At least I haven't hung up on a guest, so that's good. I don't think Soraya has either. So
no, absolutely not. No, I've never even. I can't say I've ever even butted heads with a guest. I mean, there's some people I click with better than others, but there's never been anything but respectful conversations on this show.
Besides me,
Right. Yeah, well, you're different. You're special.
Special.
You and your tuba.
Can I ask? Can I ask? Is anyone a Walking Dead fan?
I am.
What did you think of the last episode?
I thought it was great.
Spoiler alert, right? Spoiler alert.
Yeah, we're not going to say anything that happened, just in case anyone hasn't seen it yet. I thought it was fantastic. I think people forget it's meant to be horror.
Right.
And it should shock you. It should throw you. I mean, the reason it works so well is because they really make you like these characters. They develop them really well, and then they turn around and they kill them.
Yeah.
And you just feel heart-wrenched. You're like, oh, my God, they just killed that guy. And especially like with this one where it happens so suddenly and so unexpectedly, you're just like, whoa, did that just happen? Oh, yeah, that just happened. Okay.
I can't get into that because I refuse to be emotionally manipulated, and I just can't handle it.
But the thing is, that's good horror. And people watch it like it's a soap opera, and they're like, but these bad things keep happening to them. It's like, right, it's the end of the world. It's a series that's supposed to be based around horrible things. And them surviving through it and keeping together through it, you know?
I'm not a follower of the series. I do know that our good friend Michael Hughes has sort of drawn a little bit of a line in the sand over the last episode.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about the last episode. The last episode was violent to the point that when I was watching it, I'm thinking, should they be putting this on TV? Like, this is almost too much for most people.
Right.
Like, it definitely, besides just they killed someone you care about, it was human on human violence, and it was violence in such a psychopathic, blunt sort of way, and so graphic that I almost felt like this probably shouldn't be on television.
Yeah, it sounded like it crossed a little bit of a Rubicon for the series in terms of the way that it, because this is our modern equivalent of basic cable, really. Yeah, it's not. We're not in the Showtime HBO Skinamax territory. So it does sound like it maybe perhaps push that particular envelope.
But at the same time, I think at this point, pushing the envelope is exactly what they needed to do.
Yeah. It was pretty eye-popping, let me tell you that.
Man.
I know, terrible joke.
Oh, my gosh.
Eye-popping.
But as other people have said, if you watch The Strain, there's a lot more graphic stuff on The Strain. It just doesn't have the emotional impact. What gave it that emotional impact was the fact that you care about the characters. Not that The Strain isn't written well, but you don't have the same type of attachment to the characters.
Yeah, the Strain is more about the macro picture in my experience.
Yes, exactly.
Which
Whereas Walking Dead is about the people.
Yeah,
right.
So I had a I had some problems with season 6. I thought some of the pacing was off. I thought that some of the way that they concluded like the mid-season and then where they picked up afterwards, I thought that was off. Like the way they did that, I think they're getting a little too gimmicky for their own good. You know,
That could be.
Like they need to focus on the writing and telling the story, and not not these gimmicks to get everybody to come back when they're it is only the most successful show on basic cable.
Yeah.
So.
Now, and then on the other side of the spectrum, you have Ash versus the Evil Dead, which is one of the bloodiest things I've ever seen on TV. But you can't take it serious for any length of time because it's so ridiculous.
It's interesting. I recently got hooked into this podcast called "How Did This Get Made," which is a podcast that's all about. At surface level, it's all about bad films. So, like, how did this get made? But it's also about like films that are absolutely bug nut insane. And one of the films that they did was the movie Punisher Warzone, which the main reason that film worked in their contention, because it was like on the positive spectrum of how did this get made, was because the violence was so over the top and so goofy that you couldn't do anything but laugh. So that reminds me a lot of, from what I've seen of Ash and the Evil Dead, that sort of same sort of vibe.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's some of the stuff that I've only watched the first 2 episodes of this season, but they've outdone themselves in ridiculous ways, and it's just like, all right, I'm really glad this happened.
Nice.
Is it kind of like Evil? Is it kind of like Evil Dead 2 to the nth degree?
Yes. Yeah. It's most like Evil Dead 2. It's not as cheesy as Army of Darkness. It definitely has the Evil Dead 2 feel.
Well, what media are you consuming, Aaron?
What?
So what media are you consuming these days?
Not much.
Anything
just you guys.
Or just Where Did the Road Go? I'm on a steady diet of Where Did the Road Go and
Pretty
Rune
much.
It's the Where Did the Road Go Rune Soup cleanse.
I do remember an instance when I was about probably 18 to 20 years old, renting Evil Dead, which was the first time I'd ever come across it. And me and my friend, we smoked a lot of pot, and we turned on the movie, and simultaneously, for some reason, he turned on Tool. And all of a sudden, I found myself totally freaked out and envisioned going down this tunnel at very high rate of speed. And I was so freaked out, I said, turn the music off. It was Tool. You guys know Tool.
Of course.
And he turned it off, and we turned the Evil Dead movie off, which we had rented. And I was like, dude, I can't watch this. And he was like, just chill out. Let's smoke some more pot. And we watched the movie, and it was hilarious. I loved it. But that initial experience is what got me interested in the tunnels of Set. But as a young Christian, that movie scared the crap out of me until I actually watched it past the intro, and then I was like, this is awesome.
Have you read any of Kenneth Grant's stuff yet?
No, I haven't. And the Left-Hand Path stuff, I'm not... I think
even if you look at like the Magical Revival, I thought that was an excellent book on his part, which deals with Crowley, Austin Osman Spare, and Dion Fortune.
My mentor, Rufus Opus, started out as a Christian Neoplatonist, and he's now full-on Thelemic, and that bothers me. I wonder if I didn't make a wrong turn, because I'm not interested in the Left-Hand Path stuff, the Kenneth Grant stuff, the Crowley stuff. I've not read a lot of Crowley. I'm much more. I don't know. I've got a lot of questions about all this stuff, and at some point, I'd love to hear you talk more about chaos magic and why you came to it. Because I read, oh gosh, I think it's something where they talk about Baphomet and Liber Chaos or Liber. You guys know?
Oh yeah, is it Liber Null?
No, I found a lot of this stuff just kind of disturbing in there from a Christian perspective.
With me, I came across Chaos Magic totally by accident, just because I'm not big on ritual and things like that. So I kind of would read these different things about magic and tried to figure out what's actually going on here. Okay, so these are the key components. If I can do those without needing the ritual or putting my own things in that mean something to me.
Yeah.
Right. So I just kind of started experimenting. It's like, which parts of these are disposable and which parts are actually doing something. And I just started playing, swapping things in and out to see what was effective for me. I had no idea this was actually what chaos magic is essentially about, is the idea of using your own sort of beliefs. It doesn't require a belief system to be a chaos magician.
Would it be too personal a question to ask when you got into that, and how much do you accredit magic to your success?
Probably early, mid-teenager, late teenager, somewhere in that range.
What degree of success are we gauging?
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
Well,
I'm not saying that about you, Soraya. I'm just like you're not.
Soraya is
Donald
sort of
Trump
a house. Soraya is sort of a household podcast name. I mean,
I perceive it as success on my end too. But in terms of he's not a Kardashian.
Oh,
it's not Soraya
millionaire.
Kardashian.
Yeah.
But you know what? To me, successful is being happy.
Yes.
And I can say I'm completely happy with my life for the most part. I mean, there's always going to be a few nagging little things where it's like, I'm not happy about that one thing, and I'm not happy about that one thing. But overall, my happiness level far outweighs my unhappiness level. So I consider that successful. It has nothing to do with how much money I have or, how many people listen to the show or anything like that. It's a matter of, am I content with my life?
I heard you and Jim Harold talking about that when you guys first started the podcasts. Both of you said, we don't think anybody would listen to this. We're just doing our thing.
Yeah.
And you guys were both shocked. That was really cool.
I wanted to have conversations like we're having tonight. And I didn't really have people to have those conversations with. Every once in a while I'd meet someone, and it was usually someone that I didn't see all the time. So it was like, oh, I get to talk to this person about weird stuff. Great. So doing this was like, I want to talk to all these authors, and there's all these, I'd listen to Coast to Coast, and while I'd listen, I'd be like, why aren't you asking him this or this or this? And I just have all these questions in my mind. And it's like, why don't I just do this and ask them myself?
You'd be surprised how many people get involved in this just to have conversations. I mean, I know that I was kind of that person too. I just wanted to I had some ideas. I'm like, what do you think about this? But it's a lot easier to have something to bring to the table and say this is what I do. Let's talk about this versus on the comment section of a website. What do you think about the alien grave abductions?
But you know what? It's not just the authors and like you guys and stuff. It's also the listeners. This show has some amazing listeners. They're smart. They're insightful. And I've had some amazing conversations with them.
I was going to say the Ask Me Anything line of questioning that you opened up a couple months, maybe a month ago now
for Patreon.
Is the most insightful. That's the reason we're having this conversation is one of those questions. It's the demonic possession question. So it's going to take us a year to probably work through those insightful AMA questions. And I cannot thank the listeners enough for just being super on point. I'm like this Soraya, you've made something that attracts smart people. And I think Adam's done that too, and I can see Charm of the Water doing that too in the future. But this is the people that you want will find what you're doing, I think.
I think what says a lot is the YouTube listeners often leave smart, insightful comments.
Yeah.
And YouTube is not known for smart, insightful comments.
I mean, occasionally there's some YouTube comments that are it's like the cesspool of the world.
Sure, but it's the minority,
Right.
And there's always the people who are on there calling it all demonic, as we were talking about earlier. Everything's demonic, but the majority of the comments are good comments. They're intelligent comments. Sometimes I'll read them and be like, "Ooh, I never thought of that. That is really interesting," and I start looking into stuff. Of course, I can't respond to everyone, and that, I try to as best I can, but it's hitting me from so many different directions. I'll get emails and be like, "Ooh, I totally want to write this person back," and it'll sit there for 3 months, and then I'll be like, "What's this one? Oh, I never wrote that person back,"
That's really awesome that you guys are getting feedback like that. Adam, have you experienced that with your?
Oh yeah, I was about to say that, like, the getting that email where someone tells you that they really appreciate what you're doing and they enjoy the show and they like listening to it. That makes it all worth it to me. Just that one.
Yes.
Email that you get and that feeling that you're actually reaching. Because for me, I was that guy. I started listening to podcasts back in 2005, like the first one I ever listened to. And really at the time, you could even almost say that it wasn't even a podcast. Like that whole concept wasn't there yet. But Ghostly Talk was the first one I ever started listening to. And I got into a show called World of the Unexplained through them. And those guys were in North Carolina, and they were closer to my age, and I kind of related to them, and I started calling them on the show. And, I was that guy that would sit there and listen to those guys at night in my bed and go to sleep listening to it. And that someone, and I think about it, there's probably a kid somewhere out there that might be listening to Conspirinormal going to sleep, and to me it's like it comes full circle. And that's kind of what I was trying to just kind of give that back to somebody.
Yeah, I'm that kid.
Yeah.
My goal a lot of times is to keep people open-minded about this stuff, because I think the minute you settle on a paradigm, this is extraterrestrial or this is real and this isn't, you stop looking at what's really there. And until we can, and I don't think there's anything we can say 100% that we understand in this world. Yeah. I mean, we have a good understanding of some things. I mean, obviously, here we are talking on a computer from all over the country. Well, I guess we're on the eastern area, middle to eastern, but still.
East of the Mississippi, but still, yeah.
A couple weeks ago, I had Steve Stockton in, Oregon, and Steph Young in the UK, and we were having a conversation like we were sitting next to one another. Obviously, we have an understanding of how some of this stuff works and have created some amazing things, but we don't understand the depth of it.
Yeah,
we
Steph Young stuff was so awesome.
We understand it enough to manipulate it, is what we understand. And so I think when we go into the unexplained stuff, we really need to keep as open of a mind as possible. Not be gullible, not be be skeptical to the degree that you don't get tricked by stuff. But it's going to happen. Sooner or later, someone's going to tell you a story and it turns out to be nonsense. But you don't put all you don't put everything on any one story. You kind of look for patterns and try to stay in that middle sort of between the disbelief and belief, and kind of keep it there on that line.
Mm-hmm.
I hesitate. I hesitate to call it agnosticism. I totally agree with you, and I don't even like the word skepticism because of how it is in the atheistic circles.
True.
Healthy skepticism is what I'd like to describe myself as.
Well,
fair enough.
Soraya, I don't know if I ever told you how I actually found your show. I was listening to, this is back when we're still on IPBN, but this is back when I first got on it, and I was listening to see whenever Rocky would play the show, and I just pull up the app, and there's 3 guys talking about Whitley Strieber, and this is one of your shows with Aaron and Mike.
Right.
And And I just started listening to it. I'm like, this is right up my alley. These guys believe the same stuff that I believe about this. This is perfect. And I started slowly listening to the show, and just from that one chance, like I would have never known probably about Where Did the Road Go. So, and it's become a staple. I listen to it religiously now every week. Well, probably twice, 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah,
So,
depending on how many shows we do.
right.
And the interesting thing about those shows, I love those shows. That combination of those two guys was amazing. They worked together so well. We still have one more to do in the UFO history coming up.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
But
it's part 800.
Yeah, something like that. What was supposed to be I think our 2nd anniversary show, I think is what that was going to be, or maybe 3rd anniversary show, and it was just going to be one show. I don't know why I thought we could squeeze it into one show, but the thing about it is it doesn't get as high of hits as other shows, but it probably gets the most people saying these are awesome. So it gets like the highest level of feedback, but not necessarily the highest number of listens.
Yeah, they really are. They really are great. They really are great shows, and I'm glad that you've done a lot of them and that you kind of didn't stick to plan, because there's just so much to cover.
Yeah. And there's probably stuff we could have covered early on had we planned it to be a multi-part series.
Yeah.
Because the first one, we're kind of starting to rush through things, and I'm thinking, there's no way we're squeezing this into the next half hour of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I never would have known about Mike Cleland, I don't think, if I had ever heard that.
No, me neither.
I think that I knew briefly of him and was kind of intrigued of his work, but furthering knowing what he was all about, that was very important to me.
And I found out about him through Micah, actually, because he was on Micah's show, and he's talking about his experiences, and I just felt like this connection. Like, he's having different experiences than I have, but I think he approaches them in a way similar enough that I was like, I need to talk to this guy.
Well, we talk about people who have... To me, Mike is the poster child for someone who has had experiences that are undeniable. Actually, Sarai, you're sort of too, has had very odd experiences, but refuses to place some sort of set of beliefs upon them.
Yes. Yeah.
Someone who looks at what has happened to them and says, well, this sort of fits and this sort of fits, and refuses to draw, conclusions that are as stringent as, there's an invading force from Zebel Ganubi, and I always say Zebel Ganubi other than Zeta Reticuli, because that's a Terence McKenna-ism.
Everybody knows it's reptilians, Josh. Come on.
Yeah, of course. Underground.
Subterranean reptilians, exactly.
But not only do I think the world of Mike's work for that reason, but also I think that the UFO history series with him and Aaron Gulias are they are required listening. If somebody comes to me and was like, I want to know a lot about UFOs and I want to learn it through an objective prism, I think that's literally that's patient zero. That's the point to start at, in terms of really understanding what is going on with the phenomena. So kudos to you for putting that together. Honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that came together because I had them both on in the same month, and I went, wow, I really like talking to both these guys. What happens if I put them together?
Yep.
But you mentioned reptilians. Have any of you watched the new TBS show People of Earth?
No, but I saw Super Mario Brothers from 1990. What was it? Sorry.
So People of Earth is Wyatt Cenac, who used to be on The Daily Show.
Has it come on yet? I thought it didn't come on till
one episode.
Okay.
They aired one, and then I think they're going to re-air it on Halloween or Sunday, maybe. I don't know. Sunday from now. Right now it's the 29th of October when we're recording this. It's funny. It really is funny. It's about him going into to kind of write an article making fun of this UFO group. And, they're all in there arguing, going, no, it's the Greys, it's the Reptilians, no, it's the Nordics, and they're going back and forth. And then he starts realizing he's had an experience too. And it is, as long as you don't take it as an insult to the UFO culture, it's funny. Because it plays on that whole reptilian thing and everything else, and they do it well. I mean, there's no depth to it as far as UFO stuff goes, but it made me laugh.
I see reptilian culture and UFO culture as two completely different things. Probably the reason that I don't speak at a lot of conferences.
Really?
Well, I think because reptilian culture has become so mired in this like David Icke sort of underground slash underground Dulce base sort of BS that I can't. I mean, it's
Phil Snyder was telling the truth, man.
Whenever reptilian is spoken, I shut off, man. I shut off.
Even though, I mean, you could say as much in the occult community with the goat-headed Baphomet and Sabbatic goat, and it's their god. But I mean, the ayahuasca experiences with the snake entities, the Kundalini experiences with serpents.
You're saying this because you know that I feel differently about those. So it's one of those things where like whenever the materialist underground base slash hegemony sort of reptilian agenda is mentioned, that's when I shut off. When it's more in this sort of ayahuasca, sort of loosey-goosey interpretation.
Right.
Well, I mean, let's start.
Theory-anthropic continuum, that's when I sort of loosen up with what I think of it. Sorry, go ahead. Continue, Aaron. Sorry.
With the reptilian sort of snakish archetype, it's always been a metaphor for spirit.
Yes, no, and I totally agree with that. I don't mean this in the sense.
No, I totally get the nonsense aspect.
Okay, yeah, okay. Then we're on the same page. Yeah, totally.
It's funny. Gary Evans was doing some promotions for Scotty Roberts at one point, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to have Scotty Roberts on the show?" And I'm like, and I wasn't familiar with him. He's like, "Yeah, he wrote this book on reptilians," and I went, "No." No, I'm not interested in talking about reptilians. And he's going, no. It's not like that. It's not the David Icke political stuff. He traces the history of the reptilian image through, and I'm going, oh, no. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, let's have him on.
It's a good book.
Reptilian has become the opposite of Kleenex. Like Kleenex is a specific term that's meant a generic thing, and reptilian is a generic term that has come to mean a specific thing, right?
Sort of, yeah.
What I loved, there was an interview I heard of somebody, I think it was Darkness Radio, that this guy was talking about. He was telling Tim about how he was part of some group that was training reptilians to police the streets of New Orleans after Katrina or something like that.
Oh, I've heard that.
It was just weird, man. It was just like okay.
And sometimes that stuff's just fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And,
absolutely.
And we talk about being polarized into these paradigms. I've had to come full circle from Pentecostalism's ridiculousness through, a lot back to the mystical point of view. And the irony is, what if they're right? Like, what if they're right?
Well, it's one of those things where like you're faced with something really extreme, like there's a shadow government or the Pentecostal worldview, and the immediate reaction of a lot of people is to divorce themselves from that and to believe the complete opposite. But what you find, yeah, exactly. But what you find is that the more you're out there, you realize that they are getting at a certain truth. It's just that their worldview is a little bit skewed in the way that they interpret it.
Right.
And that's to me been one of the governing truths of my late 20s, early 30s is this idea that that even when people are misguided, there is a certain amount of truth in what they're saying that is actually founded in some sort of real, at least a real concern,
Yeah. And I think a lot of the problem is people make connections without evidence. They think they have evidence. They don't realize they're doing it, but they make jumps in logic. And so, these two people were went to the same school at some point. They must be connected. And it's like, wait. For instance, Douglas Dietrich. And if you heard the interviews I did with Douglas Dietrich, he sounds like he's completely insane.
I heard the first 2 minutes of every one that you've done.
I find his stuff really fascinating. And when I wish I could slow him down and keep him on like a single rail for a little bit.
Yes.
But he puts out a lot of information there, and I started checking a lot of it. And a lot of what he's saying is dead on. He's completely right. It's the jumps between the pieces that I'm not sure he's connecting correctly. You know what I mean? It's like he has a very interesting take on Roswell, that this was a Japanese test craft that the Japanese pilots were in, and the Japanese pilots were smaller than Americans. They tried to get away, they self-destructed it, and that was Roswell or something to that effect. It's actually a feasible explanation for Roswell, and it's something we would cover up.
That reminds me of a website that just sort of crossed my transom these past couple days called it's tylervision.com/spurious-correlations. Basically, if you just search for like spurious correlations website, it'll pop up. But it's a website dedicated to finding different disparate sorts of data and finding like charts that correlate to those. So you'll find that, for example, the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates with the number of films Nick Cage has appeared in any given year. And you can basically like take different points of data and like shove them together. Like, for example, like per capita cheese consumption and the number of people who have died becoming tangled in their bed sheets.
Right,
it's like
right.
ridiculous things. And that's really, really exemplary of the sort of thing that you're talking about, I think, is like seeing things that like, and honestly, these things might have some sort of deep tissue, synchronistic underpinning. I'm not denying that, because I honestly think that there might be something to that. But there are a lot of other factors involved in all these sort of things.
Well, that's it. Correlation does not indicate causation. It might be related and it might not. Just because there's a correlation between two different things doesn't mean that they are cause and effect.
Yeah.
Right.
You see that with like the fluoride stuff. You'll see, oh, well, look at our health stuff and, and this and that and the amount of fluoride, in our water and stuff. It's like, but there's other factors there too.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, whereas I do think that putting fluoride in the water is something we shouldn't be doing. I don't necessarily think it's a healthy thing or a good thing. I don't know that it's causing the kind of problem. The basis behind this is flimsy at best.
Right.
There's so much we can't know. Like,
yes.
There's so much information. We're in the age of information. There's so much conspiracy theory out, which I love. That is chaos in the system, and I love it. And you don't, back to the agnosticism or skepticism, I don't know what to believe, but it's great. You got all these stories about fluoride and autism and chemtrails and reptilians, and the system is being screwed over and it's causing chaos in the system. That's what I love about it.
So I think these correlations that people try to draw between a diminished paranormal life space and modern life are much more exemplary of the whole of modern life. So you'll see stuff like vaccines brought up. Not that I think that there's any validity to that. You'll see that there are things like, again, the fluoride treatment brought up, Wi-Fi brought up, but they're all getting the same idea, I think, in aggregate, which is the idea that we have been separated from, for lack of a better term, the spirit world, from the supernatural. And I think that perhaps it might be an aggregate of these things that are cutting us off from having more supernatural experiences, because I've mentioned this a lot of times. You look at where supernatural experiences happen. They happen in liminal areas. They happen in, abandoned haunted houses, lonely woods, lonely roadsides. Like these, rarely do you hear about an alien abduction that takes place in Manhattan.
And we're seeing a disconnect from our authority figures.
Yeah, then that's
to that lonely road.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's further it's further demarking what is the actual political divide in American politics, which is the rural-urban divide. It's I mean, loosely you could structure it on class, but it's the rural-urban city folk, country folk sort of divide. And I think that it might be a lot of these things put together that are, in the case of the urban folk, shutting us off, in the case of the rural folks, allowing us to remain open to the other, which is my preferred term for a lot of these phenomena.
What was interesting earlier when I was talking with Jenny Ashford and Steve Mira about that case is Steve was saying that they got better results not using things like infrared cameras. And the spirits actually, I think one of the EVPs they got actually said, "We're done, shut it off." or something to that effect. And basically the impression he got is that for some reason the infrared stuff and some of the technology actually bothered these things, not just that they were avoiding them, but it actually was bothering them. So when you're living in a city full of all these electromagnetic fields and all this other stuff, maybe that's why you don't see the extent of stuff you see in, more rural areas where we're isolated a little from some of that stuff.
Right. It reminds me of the Gordon White post that was talking about you don't measure a quarterback's performance in a lab and you don't measure tides in a sink. You have to be in the field and imagine something that is in the field that can control whether or not it wants to be observed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So we've been going like 2.5 hours here. So
that's what we do. That's where the road went. That is where the road went.
I feel like I need to be probably edited out a lot.
No.
Great, Aaron. Great. Killed it.
Kill that part about the goat head.
So I just so anyone knows, I rarely edit these. The times I'll edit is when there's issues with sound or somebody says something and goes, maybe I should have said that. You should probably take that part out. But it's usually very You've done that a few times. A few other people though have said they've come back later and said, I actually wasn't supposed to talk about that yet. Can you edit that out real quick?
And every now and then you have guys like Adam Sayne getting like their minibar undone, right?
Oh yeah. Something like that.
All right, so
you gotta pop over to Brisky sometimes,
Yeah.
So, where can people find you, Aaron?
Charmthewater.com.
Could you make it simpler? Come on.
Charm the Water.
I think people are going to remember charmthewater.com.
No, I'm an avid listener of Charm the Water, and I've been sort of championing it. It's a lot of great talks about magic and hermeticism and Christianity and how all those intersect. It's a staple of mine.
That's very encouraging. I didn't know anybody listened, so that's encouraging.
There are dozens of us. Dozens!
Joshua, people can find you where?
You can find me here at wheredidtheroadgo.com or at my website, which is joshuacutchin.com. I have 2 books out. The most recent one is The Brimstone Deceit. The last one is A Trojan Feast, and both are available from Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com in a variety of formats.
And Adam?
It's www.conspirinormal.com. It's no A in the middle. It's an I. Everybody makes that mistake, but it is what it is. And
another staple of my podcast listening, by the way.
Thank you. And conspirinormal.podomatic.com is where you can get the archives, but it's all linked up all together. So
nice. Well, I thank you all for joining us, and we're definitely going to have you back, Adam, Aaron. So,
absolutely.
I'll probably have Josh back, I guess.
If I have to.
Yeah. If you don't, I'll just spend my Friday night crying and sobbing.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thanks, Soraya.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
Bye.